When you hear a calling from God and say yes, you never really know the final destination. Somehow God leaves those details for us to discover during a lifetime of trial and trust. A few years ago, our guest was serving in the state Senate, not here in Pennsylvania, but thousands of miles to the west in Washington state. He has the distinction of having been elected to both the state house and the state Senate, and along the way learned lessons in friendship, kindness, and civility. Above all, Hans is a follower of Jesus, and for him that relationship informs everything. Hans Zeiger is my special guest in studio on tonight's State of Independence. Stay with us. 29 votes was the margin of victory in his first election to the Washington State House of Representatives. That's 29 votes of 52,000 cast. He'd go on to run and hold a seat in the Washington State Senate as well. It was in those roles that our guest developed a reputation as a thoughtful, diligent lawmaker with a passion for helping the next generation understand the genius of the Constitution and our system of government. Hans and his wife, Erin, have two beautiful daughters, and now in, get this, southeastern Pennsylvania is where they live, right here in the greater Philadelphia area, where Hans runs the Jack Miller Center, an organization focused on passing the American story, the history, the ideas, and the founding documents on to this generation and beyond. It's a remarkable mission. Before I introduce you to my friend, my new friend, Hans, I want you to watch a minute-long excerpt from his farewell address to his colleagues in the Washington State Senate.
I've learned that people yearn to belong, to share in a cause bigger than themselves. I've learned that enemies can quickly become friends if there's a will on one side or the other to make it so. And I learned that politics need not be a barrier to real friendship with people who wear a different party label. The friendships among the members on this floor are very significant and very valuable things for our democracy. Let me close with this. The genius of our Constitution is in seeing the capacity of our free institutions to draw on the combined imagination and wisdom of our citizens. Here, we learn and discuss and debate and listen and collaborate and compromise and reason. And we do all of that because we love this evergreen state and our respective corners of it, and because we draw on our traditions of civility. It's a rich inheritance if ever there was one. And I've been honored beyond the dreams that brought me here in the first place to take my small part in this time I've been given.
Well, Hans Zeiger, welcome to State of Independence. It's such an honor to have you here and on the program. Go back to that day, leaving politics. What were you feeling?
Well, that particular day was right before, it was right on the edge of the pandemic.
Wow.
That was March 12th of 2020.
Wow.
And we didn't know what was about to happen. Nobody was wearing masks yet.
Yeah.
And I remember we had just set aside a $5 million emergency reserve in the supplemental budget that year. And then the next day we came back and I think it was $20 million. And the next day it was $100 million because we knew that this was going to be very, very serious. And then the legislature remained very involved remotely in the ongoing approval of suspensions of laws as that was happening by the governor in the days following that. So anyway, it was certainly not the end of my time in the state Senate in the remaining months after that.
Yeah. Are Democrats in the majority in the state of Washington?
The Democrats are, although for 5 of the years that I served in the state legislature, there was a narrow Democratic majority in the state house and a narrow Republican majority in the state Senate, and I found that particular balance worked quite nicely to get everybody to the table, working together. And it was during that time period that we passed the largest transportation investment package in state history. We resolved a major court ruling that required the legislature to put more money into K-12 education. We reduced college tuition. And we did all of that on a bipartisan basis. So I saw how, a legislative body can be especially functional when everybody is in a position to work together.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you're still a young man, but you were really young when you ran for the State House. You were, 25 years old. So what was it that, tell me, first of all, like a little bit about your family, the family you grew up in, and Was it a born again kind of a family, or was church something that folks did? Was it expected of you? Did you have an experience where you came to Christ yourself, or were you somebody who just always remembers believing Jesus and following Jesus?
Yeah, I remember, when I was about 4 years old, having this sense that I need to ask Jesus into my heart. And but I grew up in a church that was very serious about the Scripture, and that was a really valuable upbringing to have. My parents, were, I think, very adamant about making sure that that was the kind of church that we were going to grow up in and that our family was going to worship in. But it really wasn't until college that I really came to deepen my personal awareness of my need for Jesus, and I also got a deeper understanding of the body of Christ. Got very involved in InterVarsity campus ministry at Hillsdale College, where I went, and so that was a really pivotal time in my life. Went to grad school after that at Pepperdine University, did a master's in public policy, started a PhD over on the other side of Los Angeles at Claremont Graduate University, but I was kind of at a juncture at that point in time. I thought I could either be on an academic track, right, and I can go be a college professor and right, go that way, or I can go back home to my home state of Washington, right, and do something in real politics. And 2010 seemed like it was going to be an anti-incumbent kind of a year. There was just, you recall, the Tea Party was going on, the recession was underway. It was a difficult time, and I thought that might be an opportunity for me to go home, challenge an 8-year incumbent, and see if I can win a seat in a swing district for the state legislature. So I just worked my heart out, went door to door, asked people for their votes, went to 13,000 doors personally, had a nice team of volunteers going to another 12,000 doors. And when the votes came in, I had won by 47 votes out of 52,000 cast, and then there was a mandatory recount, won on the final count by 29 votes out of 52,000 cast. So every vote matters. Never let anybody tell you that it doesn't. Yeah. And that was just an incredible experience going through that first campaign. And
how many terms did you serve in the state house?
I served for 3 terms, 2-year terms.
Yeah.
And learned so much during that time, probably more than if I had stayed in that PhD program. Yeah. You learn so much about what's on your neighbors' minds, and how you can listen effectively and translate what you hear into good policy. And you may not always be able to solve somebody's problem, but you can be a listening ear, and maybe you can make some connections for them. But sometimes you can be involved in solving problems. You can work together with people and come up with, maybe it's some just small little problem that nobody else is paying attention to, but okay, if we just do this one thing, change the law in this little way, or provide some little proviso in the budget, then there's a solution to a problem. So that was a lot of fun to be part of that, to see how there's a lot of people of goodwill getting involved in our process. And
well, you mentioned that in your farewell speech. You talked about civility and about meeting people who are on the other side of the aisle. You come from a pretty conservative Republican background, and the state of Washington is not known to be a conservative place as such. Right. A lot of Democratic governors of late, and as you mentioned earlier to me, I think the state Senate may have had a narrow Republican majority when you were there. And I don't know if it still does. And
not anymore.
Not anymore.
No,
yeah.
but I'll tell you, one of the things that really was an education to me was getting involved in a Tuesday morning prayer group and fellowship group that would get together, and it was Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, getting together and saying, we want to fellowship, we want to focus on our faith and deepening our understanding of God's will in our lives as human beings who are called to this lawmaking process. And that made such a difference, and also made me think, okay, there are people who can disagree about policy but share something in common when it comes to our faith.
Yeah. So tell me how, here you are, a bright young star, you've been elected to the state house, and then you get elected to the state Senate. And for people who are on that kind of a track, normally it's like, well, I want to be a member of the U.S. Congress, I want to be governor, maybe I'll run for the U.S. Senate, if I could muster up the support and build up my name ID so that I could be competitive. But you do something very, very different from that. So you end up leaving your home state and coming to the other side of the country to run the Jack Miller Center. So tell me, what was God saying to you that you would just leave politics and what looked like a bright career? I'm guessing that you could have probably stayed in that Senate seat as long as you wanted.
Yeah, and actually I'd gone into local government for a short time, and but I realized I don't want to be a career politician. I mean, I could keep going on this pathway, but that's really not where my heart is. And after being in legislative roles, I want to run something. And the real challenge that was on my heart was about our country's civics crisis. This lack of, this decline in purpose and connectedness that we have in our body politic. And I saw that as a crisis, and I thought I want to do something about that. And the opportunity came along to lead the Jack Miller Center, which is a network of university professors who care about teaching civics and history at every level, and certainly at the university level where they're working, but also how do you transfer that over to our K-12 teaching workforce? How do you create a culture and an information environment that affirms the meaning of the blessings of liberty in our country?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to figure out, is how do you supercharge a movement for civic education? There's a huge opportunity coming up with the 250th birthday of our country in 2026. And that's an opportunity for us to rally around civic purpose and awareness. That ought to be the cause of our generation.
Who is Jack Miller?
Jack Miller built a very impressive office products company out of Chicago, starting in the 50s, and sold it to, his company was called the Quill Corporation, sold it to Staples in the late 90s for a nice fortune, and decided he was going to spend the rest of his life investing in civic education at the university level. And so the Jack Miller Center got underway in 2004. We've been pretty quietly making investments in the careers and the community of scholars in political science and history and other fields who are focused on the big civic questions, that impact our experiment in self-government in this country, and seeing some real success in that. We have had played a major role in shaping the subfield of political science that's called American political thought, and we've also laid the personnel groundwork for some very interesting, innovative work that's going on in higher education. Some of the most exciting reforms happening now include some programs devoted to civic thought and leadership in public universities. So very, very excited about it.
Yeah, I can't imagine. The need is so great. I was a history major in college, and I've always been a student of history, certainly of American history. But as I've been able to travel to different parts of the world, to see to learn those histories as well, and then to understand how those governments interact with our government, and then of course when you go places, you realize that there's no place like the United States. Nobody, even as beautiful as some of the places are, and with their storied histories, no place is like the United States of America and what we have here, and what the founding fathers built. I'm concerned, as I think many Americans are, that maybe our younger generation doesn't really know that story so well. Maybe they don't really have a strong sense of it. And maybe they don't see it modeled so well either in terms of how we interact, that is how people who are in government politics interact with each other and with the public. So it was like a breath of fresh air to hear you talk about being with people on the other side of the aisle. You don't give up anything. You're not in any way compromising your faith system or any of your beliefs to be friends with people who might be on the other side of the aisle, who, by the way, are not your enemy either.
Right. The biggest thing I learned in my time in public service was that relationships are more important than policies. This was some wisdom that a former state legislator had given me right after I was elected. Relationships are more important than policies, and I just saw that affirmed at every turn. But the thing kind of adding to that I learned was that if you want to make good policy, you've got to have good relationships. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, for any walk of life, whether you're involved in legislating or whether you're involved in business or whether you're involved in the nonprofit sector like I am now.
Yeah, well, it kind of speaks to what the scriptures say. You know, we're supposed to, in the process of loving God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we're supposed to love our neighbor like we love ourselves. You know, and so what you're talking about really is loving your neighbor. And if you love your neighbor, then you want to get to know them and talk with them and have a relationship with them. And as you say, you know, that really goes a long way towards helping to shape policy and to be able to make meaningful compromise to get things done for the American people.
And I think we have to recover a relational kind of politics in our country. I mean, so much of it is performative. So much of it is, how can you score points that make the other side look bad, whatever,
right.
And I think that political leaders can have a very powerful role in setting an example and saying, no, we're not going to play the game. We're not going to go along with sort of the way that you're supposed to proceed in this very performative era that we live in, and we're going to demonstrate love toward our neighbors who are involved in the policy process. We're going to choose kindness. We're going to choose civility. We're going to choose to build trust. And I think that's how we move forward as a country. I also think it's so important that we recover what you're talking about, with getting a sense of history. We need to understand our country's history with all of its flaws and, really get that grounding in the wisdom that we can learn from the lessons of our past. I think we can also have an appreciation for the blessings that we have to be in this country when we study our past and the journey that it took to get here. And, a board member of mine is a very good historian, Wilfred McClay, likes to say, it's great that we talk about critical thinking all the time, but what we really need right now is appreciative thinking. And I think that's so true.
So how do you recruit your professors? You've got a cadre of professors around the country who are either supported by the Jack Miller Center or certainly on their radar, on the Jack Miller radar. How do you interact with them? How do you support them? Do you recruit people? Do you say, like you're teaching at the University of Tennessee, and you're a history professor, and we think you're somebody that could really, given your track record, and you're, as a history professor, we think you'd be ideal for being part of our group and helping us to, tell me how that works.
Yeah, so we will talent spot, and very often on the recommendation of senior scholars in our network, junior scholars as they're finishing their PhD, just getting involved in their first teaching job, getting a postdoctoral fellowship, and we'll get a couple dozen of those junior scholars together for a 10-day program. We'll do that every summer, and that's our fellows program, Miller Fellows program. And then we'll look for ways to keep in touch with that cohort as they go through their careers. How can we support you as you're getting tenure, provide publishing opportunities? How can we help you set up a center, run a center focused on our American political tradition on your campus? And then as they're getting new jobs, how can we help you be positioned for success, that kind of thing. So we're interested in community formation. We're interested in finding good opportunities for these folks. I mean, we need a bench of people who care about our country's history and civic tradition, who are teaching in our universities. And, really we need a paradigm shift all throughout our education system that brings us back to the civic purpose of education. And that's really our theory of change, is that if you can invest in this group of academic scholars, talented entrepreneurial academic scholars, that's going to have ripple effects, because they're teaching the next generation of K-12 teachers. They're teaching the next generation of political leaders and thought leaders and nonprofit leaders and business leaders.
Yeah, awesome. When we return, I'll ask Hans why he and Aaron packed up and moved across the country to embark on their latest new adventure. Please don't go away.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
My special guest is Hans Zeiger, and despite a last name that sounds very Pennsylvanian, he hails from the great state of Washington. He served in the Washington State House and Senate, but today he's got a new assignment: director of the Jack Miller Center, headquartered in Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania, right here in our neck of the woods. So good to have you here. So what was it like for you all to make the trek? I mean, what did your wife say when you told her, you felt that the Lord was moving you in a different direction, that you'd been involved in politics, but maybe it was time to do something different? And tell me how that worked.
Not easy to make the move from Washington State. Of course, a beautiful part of the country. We've got a lot of friends and family out there, and we'll always have an anchor out there. But it turns out my wife has some deep family roots in Philadelphia. Her father grew up part of his time in Philadelphia, and his ancestors had come over from Ireland starting in the 1850s. So it's been cool to discover some of the family roots and connections in the Philadelphia area. We're settled in, living in Bala Cynwyd, not too far from where I work. Our two daughters are enjoying school and ballet and making connections in the neighborhood. There's so much history. That's the first thing everybody always says about this part of the country. A lot to do for a family, in the Philadelphia region and beyond. So we're very blessed to be here.
Do you find that one of the benefits of not being an elected official is that maybe you have more time for your family now? I mean, I worked for a U.S. senator and a U.S. president, and I know that those jobs are kind of all-encompassing. And for people that work in the State House, the State Senate, it's the same thing. I mean, your life is really busy working on legislation, but like you said, also creating relationships with your colleagues so that you can actually get legislation passed, that you can put it together and then get it passed and enacted. But that takes a lot of time, and so for lots of legislators, the one thing they don't have is time to spend with their families.
I was busy being in politics, not only with the things that I was required to do by the nature of the job, but there's a lot of things that you want to do in the community to build connections with your friends and neighbors, and I got involved in a lot of different community activities. And Washington State is a part-time legislature, and so I was piecing together some other part-time jobs at the same time that I was in the state legislature, including being in the National Guard. I would not say that being a nonprofit executive like I am now is it's got its own demands, and I have to travel a lot, but this is the first time in my entire career where I've just had basically my job and my family to kind of focus on, and so that's kind of a nice thing, just to kind of focus on the one job and my family. And but anyway, it was interesting leaving the political vocation, because that's so much of my identity. It was it was totally wrapped up in that title and that office and my relationship to the community, and I had thousands of friends and neighbors who had expectations for me, and that puts a certain amount of pressure on you. And so it took kind of a step of faith to walk away from that and say, I'm going to go a different direction in my career. There is life after politics, and it's I really appreciate the opportunity to do what I'm doing now, and I think at a critical time for our country when we need to shore up the civic foundations and our shared understanding of what it means to be a citizen in this country.
What would you say to a young person who looks at you and wants to be just like you? What would you say to that person that's looking to maybe have a career in politics and then maybe even a career like you have now in the not-for-profit world, having to do with civic engagement? What would you say to them?
I would say study history. So critical, as we were talking about earlier. And I would say get involved in your community and get involved in things that you're really passionate about in your community. I would always tell candidates or people who are thinking about running for office, find 3 things that you can really delve into in your community, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, your church, a Kiwanis, a Rotary Club, whatever the case may be. Get really involved, and that will lay a solid foundation for you to make the connections in your community, gain a lot of experience and wisdom, and people ought to think about running for office or getting involved in other ways. I mean, citizenship is more than voting.
Yeah.
It's not just casting a vote on election day every 4 years or something. It is, how do you get involved in helping people around you? How do you get involved in a nonprofit board? How do you get involved in cleaning up your neighborhood? Things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Hans, thank you so much for joining us today on State of Independence.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Hans Zeiger is no different than you or me. He's won some big titles, earned plenty of recognition and awards, but in the end, it's his relationship to his Creator that matters most. There's a lot to be learned from this good man and his journey in trusting God. I'll be right back to wrap it up with our great producer, Jeff Coleman. Stay with us.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Civics is more than voting.
Yeah.
And it's more than getting to know your political party. You know, when you run for a borough council or township supervisor, when you sign up to be an auditor or judge of elections, all of these positions that are in Pennsylvania going unmanned. I mean, if you look at the numbers, Joe, we're dropping people that are used to volunteer for positions. The World War II generation, the Vietnam War era generation, flooded all of these positions of trust and responsibility, and it made communities work. Well, now they're gone. And if you're a Christian and you have this dual citizenship gift, your citizenship in heaven and your citizenship here, you've got a real responsibility. So you have to look around and say, where's the need? Not how many meetings is it a month? Will this be inconvenient? Of course it will be. And it'll be hard on your family. You've got to make adjustments. But it may be the right season of life, especially in an era when people are living in such isolation.
Yeah. Well, you served. You were a state rep. You were,
and I was a borough councilman.
There you go.
Which, when you think about borough council or these local, my wife is a borough council woman in Lemoyne, and when you look at these positions, I mean, they're headaches. It's the police reports and the budgets and the audits and the parks committee and. But they're all the things that make a community worth living and worthwhile. Yeah. But they're also spaces where when you have questions about the big issues, religious liberty, expression, the use of a public building, all of those things come before that local body. If there aren't people who are motivated by their faith or informed by their religious convictions, who don't understand the Constitution or their rights, somebody else will be making those decisions. But listening, learning, participating, that's part of being a citizen. Yeah, great conversation.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, from the very beginning of this program, our mission was to help you see in real life what it looks like to trust God, to follow Him with all your heart and mind and soul, and then to be able to love your neighbor like you love yourself. I think we saw that so clearly in tonight's program. Take a moment to drop me a line in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'd love to hear how this program impacted you. And between now and when we meet next, stay encouraged. Trust God. Believe in His promises because He never fails. From America's very first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. For Jeff and the entire team behind the cameras at Lighthouse TV, thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next time. It was fun. Hans is one of your guys. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
like you were like what, 25 when you won your seat, and he was 25 when he won his seat.
I think we had a conversation shortly after I was born in the state.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you. Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.